Hey, what's up? Scott here from the TrepTECH podcast. Now, if you're a beginning entrepreneur and you're having a hard time putting everything together, you have to do the sales, the marketing, you have to do the client delivery, you have to put together all of your automation, link up your website, do this, do that, and you're getting perplexed and frustrated, and you just need a little bit of help along the way because you don't know what you don't know. The TrepTECH Academy is now open, and you can go check that out. You will be able to go see the inner workings of both mine and Airial's businesses, and you'll be able to get an understanding of how things link up, how to make the process easier, and how to go from being frustrated to financially having a blast, and all the steps in between. We map it out. It's filled with tons of swipe files, templates, copy, and of course, a lot of our failed experiments. So if that sounds like something you would enjoy checking out, you can go to www.treptechacademy.com and click the subscribe button and sign up.
Airial, if I could marry her brain, it would be amazing.
If you need anything technical.
She is down to earth. She's fun. She's very easy to network with.
Anything systems oriented.
Just anything web dev techie that I don't understand, Airial has swooped in and fixed. And she's my accountability bulldog.
She is a queen.
Anything infrastructure related.
She is helpful, and she helps guide and answer all your questions that you have about growing your business and networking and getting started.
She gives me life. She just gives me life.
Airial Re'nal is your girl. Welcome to the TrepTECH podcast with your host, Airial Re'nal.
I just want to marry her brain. She's a genius.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of TrepTECH podcast. I am your humble servant, Scott Doucet, and I am here with the glorious, the fantastical, the phantasmic Airial Re'nal. Airial, how you doing?
Hey, Scott. Thanks for the intro. And you know what? The funny thing is when you're like, hey, another episode, I'm thinking of the Veteran Woman podcast.
Yeah, not quite. You know, I've got a little more input here than I would on the Veteran Woman podcast.
Oh, you got a lot more here because we hear your voice. I don't even let you speak on that podcast. I appreciate you producing it and doing the show notes and coaching me through the whole process. But yes, that's really, really my show. That's my baby.
Oh yeah, and you know what? You don't need any help there. That's for sure. So we are bringing in the big guns today because we're going into a topic that I have very limited perspective on. I know what I've seen, I know what I've heard, but I have not experienced it firsthand, and that is racism in business. Now, I'm a white male. I'm 30 years old. I grew up in a small town in Canada, predominantly white. You know, I'm to be completely fair, and I think it's a fair assessment to say I'm fairly naive on the topic of racism. I've seen it, I've heard about it, but I do not know how it feels because I've never been the subject of. Now, Airial, I know that you have your own story, but I think it was smart for you to call in our next guest, or our very first guest, to be honest with you, and that is Keenen Smith, to talk about the subject of race and business. Keenen, how are you doing, man?
Hey, what's up, guys? Hey, I'm actually doing very, very well. I'm actually sitting at my desk right now, feeling good. I think I have pneumonia, but I got to keep working. I got 4 or 5 things working out. This is how it goes, man.
I love it. And thank you for joining us, man. I appreciate it so much. It's great to have you here.
So, Scott, let me give a little bit about my upbringing.
Yeah.
So I was raised in a little town called Crockett, Texas. It sits over in East Texas, not far from Lufkin, Huntsville, Bryan College Station, or Palestine. For those who watch NFL, Adrian Peterson was from Palestine, Texas, about 36 miles north of where I grew up. And Des Bryant was about an hour east of where I grew up. So just to give you kind of idea of where I grew up. And my school, going to school, because that's where you see other cultures and where you come into contact with other people. It felt like it was 50-50. And A few years ago, I actually looked at the census report for my area, and it's about, I think, 42% minority or Black, African American, and then some Hispanics, and then the rest is Caucasian. So after looking at that, I'm like, okay, that makes sense why I didn't feel the strains of racism that some other people feel, because I'm a Black female, for those who are listening and don't know. And another thing that got me was because I spoke properly, I would get pushback, and my friends would say, or my classmates would say, oh, you're trying to be white, you're trying to act white, you're talking white, that kind of thing. So that was an interesting dynamic as well. And that's another reason why I wanted to bring Keenen in, because between the three of us, you see different sides of race and business. So Scott is a Caucasian male. Scott, you are in Canada, and I think Canada, changes things up a little bit. Me, I'm kind of like in between, because up until the last few years, I've always hung around Caucasians, and I would forget about color until somebody brings it up. I'm like, oh, I am the only Black person in the room.
Well, and it's funny you say that you think Canada changes it up, because I really do think that racism looks different depending on where in the world you are. Like, racism in Africa is going to look different than racism in Europe, is going to look different than racism in Canada. And especially in my town, because like I grew up around a lot of racist people. There are members of my family who are racist people. And I face to face with a Black person, likely to be the most respectful people ever. But the second the doors are closed and people start throwing jokes around and saying things, you start seeing, their real feelings and beliefs and things.
It's called inside racism.
Yeah. And so like, that's the kind of thing I've seen around here, but just like the type of stuff I see in films and in, on YouTube and things like that is people being like outwardly, aggressively, openly racist. And that is horrendous to me.
If you make the culture believe that it's okay, like you have to understand the power in media and music, everything. You make it okay there, then it's acceptable anywhere.
That's true.
Scott, you mentioned depending on where you are, it looks different. So I spent 3 years in Naples, Italy, under a NATO unit. And the interesting thing was, and NATO has a ton of different countries, Canada being one of them, but it was interesting just to see the dynamics of different nationalities in Italy and how everyone was treated. And even when it comes to like everyone learning the language. But one thing I noticed about personally is whenever I would go into a restaurant or a store, I always spoke it. I mean, I've even had people say, when I was in Italy, I had people from Northern Italy say, oh, you're from Naples, because I pick up the language, I pick up the mannerisms, everything. So when I would go somewhere and I, initially speaking Italian, I would get looks and I would get brushed off. But then when I was switching to English with my American accent, it's as if I got a whole new level of respect. And I think it has something, someone told me, it has something to do with African females in Italy. So that's like a distinguisher I had to make. Like, I'm a Black American, I'm not a African woman. And that's just, it's interesting.
Yeah, like I would have never thought that, even because for me, like, it's weird and it's going to sound absolutely terrible, but for me, I wouldn't think there'd be racism. Like, I didn't think your nationalism would matter. I thought, like, if you're Black, you're Black. Like, I didn't realize that it went even deeper. Like, is there like interculture racism too?
Yes.
Like, do
Yes.
darker skins dislike lighter skins? Like,
Yes.
man,
Yes.
this is way thicker than I thought it was.
It's a generational virus. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a very, 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 very important problem that we have. We've divided ourselves amongst ourselves because some of us are trying to change things, and some of us are trying to look within and trying to understand, like, what is the problem, Instead of saying, hey, listen, this is a problem, saying it's a lot to it, man. It's a lot of manifestation in that thing, man. It's a lot of that, man.
Keenen, can you let people know your background, like how your upbringing, so they know what perspective you bring to the conversation?
Yes, ma'am. I'm from Jackson, Mississippi. I was born and raised in Kenton, Mississippi. Low wages and poverty. My mother was a single mother. I never let's say this, Caucasian people, and I do give them respect. I'm trying not to say white because I learned that is offensive, you know. Where I'm from, in my background, Caucasian people do not come out of their neighborhoods, and that is in the South. They subject themselves and build their own neighborhoods, their own cities. And where I'm from, they use the police to be able to set barriers to enforce the race policy. So I originally moved to Kansas. I moved to Kansas to be able to better my life and change things. And I didn't know how diverse certain areas of Kansas were. You know what I mean by diverse? I've never seen white people say the N-word. It was kind of offensive. Even in business, I've never sat around people and they were allowed to, you know, use certain terminologies, even proper. I used to speak ebonics. You probably can still hear some ebonics, but I've never been subjected to it. Like, I'm not used to even sitting. Before 5 years ago, I was never used to sitting amongst Caucasian people at all. So that's one of the things that I had to learn, you know, diversity. So that's me. Brief, but that's me.
Now, Mississippi, am I wrong in thinking that racism is a very special kind of racism in the South?
No, it's the most brute force type of racism. It is one of the most outstanding, traumatic things, but it's a barrier. You know, in Mississippi, it says even in the laws, if you look deep within the laws and you look deep within the meaning of the culture there, if you overstep your boundaries too far, yeah, you'll be dealt with, you know?
Yeah. Because like one of the things that I mentioned is like every time the media depicts racism, they usually pick, if it's outward, blatant, just in your face, you know, shouting at you in the street type of racism, it's usually in the southern states. And I'm so far detached from that.
You always have to think about, you know, like at those levels, you know, when you're trying to depict something. I'm in marketing right now. Who you marketing to? Who are you marketing that towards? What message are you sending? It's a much deeper purpose to what they're actually trying to relate to.
And me and Keenen have talked about that. And Scott, going back to how you view Mississippi, when Keenen told me that, I had the same reaction. I was like, oh, you are like stereotypical Black, like Black male growing up kind of thing, because you were raised in the South, like Mississippi, Georgia, Louisiana, South, you know, that kind of thing. So some of the stereotypes and views that you may perceive, I have them, and I'm Black.
Well, I mean, and I love that we're bringing up stereotype, and I love that we're bringing up, you know, these perceptions, because like, I think one of the things that the media tries to do, or in the past has tried to do, is to kind of interweave racism and classism together. Yeah. And like, so that people automatically assume that all Black people are broke, or people automatically assume that all white people are greedy, rich white people, you know. And it's crazy to me because like I grew up in a family that was low income as well. To be completely honest with you, at the moment, I'm just building my credit now. I can't pass a credit check without a little bit of shame, man. You know, I'm at a point like that. Like, I grew up broke, and I know of Black families that grew up so much more wealthy than my family did. Right. And they, you know, with so much more values, family values and wholesome values and all that than I did. And like, so I feel like where the classism is involved, I can kind of draw a line and say, okay, no, racism is this, classism is this, they're not the same. But I think when a lot of people think like quote unquote stereotypical Black, like that, I didn't even know like Airial that was a thing. Like, you know, like I understand stereotyping, but for you to just say that you thought Keenen was stereotypical Black, I was like, wait, what? Yeah. I always thought stereotypical Black, like the way they paint it is like Boys in the Hood.
Right. I mean, and it flips. I did a show with Kwame Corbett, and we were talking, and it was a panel of Black females talking about, you know, race and raising Black men and that kind of thing. I don't have any children, but I mentioned, like I mentioned earlier, it was flipped too, because I spoke well, because I spoke properly. I conjugated my verbs properly, and I wasn't in the streets. I wasn't slinging dope and all that stuff. It was perceived that I thought that I was better than everyone.
Right.
Wow.
And so I had to learn ebonics to make myself feel like I fit in.
Right. And that's a part of our culture where we have to actually separate ourselves in our own races to be able to live comfortably. That's a horrific fact.
Yeah, and like when I think about that, like just because you speak properly, you're perceived better than anyone. That happens with us too. You know, white people do the same thing. And because I feel like that's very much a classism thing. And the reason why is because, like, I can walk into a meeting, or I can walk into, let's say, a meeting with my friends. Like, we all agreed to hang out, and I go hang out with them. If I walk in there and I'm like, I speak more ebonics than you do, Airial. If I go in there and I speak the way just I always speak, dropping F-bombs and, you know, using dude and man constantly all over the place, I fit right in. It's great. But if I walked in there and I was like, good afternoon, gentlemen, how are you?
Ooh.
Immediately they'd be like, get out of here, man. Go away. You think you're better than us? You think your shit don't stink? You think, you know, I'd be getting all of that because, like, it's almost, if you carry yourself like you are proud of yourself, you need to be torn down. And I'm not a huge fan of that.
Right.
I don't like that at all.
Another thing that me and Keenen were talking about being humble. Because Keenen and I are working on a lot of mindset stuff when it comes as far as business and building his personal brand.
Oh, business is a whole other ballgame.
Yeah. So, and I've had someone ask me, a woman asked me before, a Black woman, she's a veteran, and she has a nonprofit. And she asked me, being Black in Georgia, in her town, wearing braids, if she should pretty much have a stock photo representing her nonprofit, or should she put her face there?
Wow.
That was a deep conversation.
Whoa.
Yeah.
But I get it. I get it because when I branded the veteran woman, my podcast cover art has my picture on it. I myself struggled with that because my brands in the past, you couldn't tell that it was a Black business owner. But now I've started to embrace it because I'm like, this is me. Whoever is going to be with me is going to be with me no matter what color they are or what color I am.
Wow. See, and the first taste I've gotten of that is this. I watched an interview this week, and it was the Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort, and he was being interviewed on The Breakfast Club, which is a hip hop interview show out of New York. It's one of my favorite shows because I just find that they know how to conduct an interview and they can get to the bottom of just about any point. And of course, because it's a hip hop station, prejudice and racism and all that is a big thing. And it's talked about a lot on that station.
Yep.
And one of the things that DJ Envy, who was one of the hosts, said was that when he was doing telephone sales, his name is Rashawn, and he would drop the R off his name so that when he called, he'd just be Sean from such and such company.
Right.
And that he would get more sales as Sean than as Rashawn.
Right. Uh-huh.
And my jaw hit the floor, and I was like, oh my God, that's crazy to me.
In business, me and Airial talked about it. I had a brand, a business, and I went by alias. You know, it's even my personal brand now. Like, the brand was Expo brand, but I never put my face on it. And the reason why I never put my face on it was because I was perceived as a Black hustler here in town. And also not knowing, having the knowledge of businesses, we're actually growing my internet presence a little bit more. I had to be able to, like, I'll give you the real story behind that. When you're smart and you're perceived as a hustler, right? Because you know business, you know different things like that, right? I had to restructure and re-image, like, and redesign my whole business. Like, I used to put my face on things. When I stopped taking my face on things, my sales went up. When I hired a Caucasian guy and he walked into some of the same businesses, he closed the businesses with my name at the top of the checks, man. Can you believe that?
You know, I do believe it. And that's what I was going to say is, like, when on the interview, when Jordan Belfort answered, something clicked in my head that I had never realized before. And I had experienced it, Keenen, and never realized it before, is likability. Like attracts like, and like likes to deal with like.
Right.
And so I hadn't realized this, but I experienced something very similar, is that, like, you could put me in front of 20 white people.
Uh-huh.
I will likely close 10 to 15 of those sales. Airial literally dropped 20 Black people, like leads, people who wanted to work with me, who wanted a podcast. She introduced them all to me, just dropped 20 names in my lap.
Uh-huh.
I closed 0.
Right.
And you know what?
Same exact process, both places.
Right.
But that's a whole other thing too. We have other aspects to look. Now, they trusted me because it was a women of color group that I got them from. So I'm a woman of color. So they're like, yeah, I guess I didn't set up, that Scott is Scott. Scott, do you realize you're my best friend? Never met in person. I was thinking about that the other night. I was like, he is my best friend. And we've never met in real life.
Well, it doesn't matter if I'm culturally respectful. It doesn't matter if I'm culturally accepting. It does not matter if I have experienced some of the same things. It's the perception of me as well that comes factored in, right?
Yes.
And a part of that is
pirate and everything.
Oh my God. Like I've got tattoos all over my hands, on my neck. Like that's the other thing too, Keenen, is like I get a lot of even just like rich white people won't talk to me.
Really?
Really, because I have tattoos and, like all that. Like I do throw some people off too. And when I first got into business, I was like, I need to brand all that out. I need to make sure like none of my tattoos are visible. I need to wear like a polo. I've never worn a polo in my life. And I was like, I need to clean up my speech and censor everything just because the whole perspective situation kind of came in. But like when I went and talked to all of these Black women, these African-American women, we were speaking and I was giving them the same exact rundown that I gave white men and white women. The trust element, the amount of trust that I got from one demographic versus the other was vastly different. And it's because just straight out the gate, there's a perception, but then there's also a difference in values. Right. There's a difference in just flat out likability and relatability. There's a difference in culture. And in other words, like just the way we speak to one another. It's all so dramatically different that Rashawn would have done better than Scott in my situation. And I'm not mad about it. I'm not upset about it. It's something that I noticed and I didn't realize it until Jordan Belfort said it, is that an Asian person is going to sell better to an Asian person. A white person is going to sell better to a white person and a Black person is going to sell better to a Black person just because it has nothing to do with actual race. It has everything to do with relatability when it comes to sales and business.
And it also depends on what business you're in. For instance, when I had my candle shop, my partner, and I see race, but I don't see race. But in my candle business, I knew my primary market was middle-aged white people.
Oh man, middle-aged white women love candles.
Yes.
It's their life.
My partner fit that description. I was the main driver, but my partner, the dynamic, and she wasn't, we were fine. We didn't have the racial tension, but it's like she knew who to approach and I knew who to approach. I would approach the Caucasians too, but I knew if I wanted a Black person to buy, I had to approach them.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's not to say I haven't closed sales with, Black people. There's one of my clients, he's from Britain. He's Black, does a technology show, easily one of the best shows that I've ever heard. It's just got, it's got flavor, Airial.
One of the best shows.
Man, it's about electric cars. And that was a topic I had no interest in until he started talking about it. Let me just put it that way. I've heard nerdy white guys talk about electric cars till they're blue in the face. And I couldn't get into it.
And you know what?
This man addresses it, and I was like, no, I want an electric car yesterday.
You know what? To be honest, that is one of the reasons why I decided to do the TrepTECH podcast. Because this is one of those deep down reasons that I would never admit, but it works perfectly for this talk that we're having. I was like, okay, how many I'm just going to be real. How many regular Black folk have a podcast about entrepreneurship? Okay, this sounds so bad. So when I say regular Black folk, somebody who's just laid back, not all prim and proper. There's a place for that, but just laid back. And that's my whole brand, is laid back, and we can have fun in business and, live out our passion and get paid for it.
Well, I will say that more of the sales calls that I do with Black people are way more formal. They're suited or well-dressed. They're respectful. They're,
We feel like we have to live up to something, like we have to meet you at your level,
Holy shit, if you want to meet me at my level.
You haven't seen Scott.
Not visual.
You're going to have to lower yourself a bit.
You ever seen that Scott without seeing Scott's face and I hear his voice? Imagine something. If you ever look at a map of the United States and you look at the bottom to the top of it, right? Imagine there's an arrow pointing up. This is how people think. There's an arrow that's pointing up and outwards that says, this is the proper scale. The more outwards and the more upwards I go, that's the perception that I have to keep up. Imagine that.
That does make sense to me too. And again, like when I first got into business, like I never thought I'm going to have to change my name or put a completely different race on my branding. But I did notice that like when Airial would go out and, you know, I want to say pimp me out, but talk me up, you know, for lack of a better word, when she would go out and talk me up, the influx of people that would come my way were primarily Black. Mm-hmm. When I would go and talk myself up, the influx of people who would come my way are primarily white.
And you know, over the last few years, I just started working with Black people. So that is like a big difference for me. I'm like, oh, wow. There's like Black people who care about building their business. That sounds so bad, but I'm just going to be real because that's what the podcast is about. It's about being real.
What's crazy about it, Airial, is like when you show up to calls with me, you're usually wearing a t-shirt, a beanie. You may or may not have pants on. Your mic may or may not be plugged in, you know.
House robe.
Yeah. Like you're very relaxed and chill about it. And then, you know, when I get on calls with a lot of the people that I bring in who are white, they're, you know, I won't say they're poorly dressed, but they're not, they didn't put in the effort the way that, you know, every Black person that you have connected me with, Airial, when they show up to a call, they're literally like, I'm showing up in like maybe a V-neck t-shirt and a pair of jeans, a plaid shirt if I'm feeling particularly pretty that day. Mm-hmm. And like the Canadian tuxedo, you know, plaid, denim. But, you know, and these people get on and they're wearing like, I swear, church wear, minus the hat.
You know what's fun is that when we talk, okay, so first of all, there's this meme going around Facebook, like, I may be ghetto, but my customer service voice went to Harvard. It's about how we change, how we talk, depending on who we're talking to.
Yeah.
I've noticed that when I onboard a client, now, if you watch me on Facebook, you see the ins and outs of my life. You see every side of me on my Facebook profile. When I onboard a client, I'm a little more proper, kind of like what I'm talking right now. But by the time we get into the coaching relationship, it's like, girl, let me tell you. and then it's like they come out like, whew, I can let my hair down. Okay, we can have some real talk. And it's just so interesting to see that dynamic. I love it because that lets me know they're comfortable being them. And it's like, hey, it's not always, you know, roses and cupcakes. Shit happens. And let's talk about it.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things I think is we do change based on who we're talking to. And, you know, like Keenen said earlier, he mentioned that a white colleague of his would go in and close businesses he had just visited, even though his name was on the checks. Just because, like, again, it changed the dynamic, it changed the perspective, it changed everyone's comfort level and their trust. And it's crazy to me that that happens. And like, I want to say don't get it twisted because I don't know how else to say it, but like, don't get it twisted. Like, we're not putting up barriers. You know, we all work together. We all support each other's businesses. Like, we know race exists because I think to say I don't see race is a very ignorant statement. We know race exists. We're just accepting of one another's racial status, class, all that. Like, there's no discrimination here in this little core group, but we do recognize that we see it outside. And one of the things that I want to say is that I have never been more shouted from the rooftops or feel more good about myself than when I've supported a Black business. And not because I feel some sort of like, oh, look at what I've just done, you know, because that Black business owner just takes it to a level of appreciation I've never felt from helping out a white business. It's unreal. Like, for instance, if I send you clients, Airial, or I send, because like I do business with quite a few different people. Yeah. And anytime that I send referrals over to a Black person, the amount of appreciation I get back is almost palpable. I can almost like touch it through the screen. I can feel it. If I send clients to a white person, they're like, yeah, thanks, man. That is it.
And you know what? But I think the people who you have sent my way that I've worked with, it may have been some, you know, hidden stereotype. Like, okay, what is she going to do? Until I get it done, then it's like, oh, shit.
delivery is huge. I've always said delivery is the proving ground. You know, if you get to the point where you've got a chance to show yourself, show what you can do, show what you're capable of, because like, let's face it, what we're talking about is all the barriers to get to that point. Once you're given that point to like show what you are good at and show what you're worth, color disappears, because then you don't find.
No.
It doesn't completely disappear.
No. I've been micromanaged. I've been, like, being honest, I'm the best in my field, man. Like, serious business. Serious note. Matter of fact, I'm the only person in the city of Wichita, Kansas that does social media marketing, right? And that does it the right way. Seriously. Like, actually go into the businesses, actually do it the right way. It's not offered as a marketing product. It's marketed as a main product, correct? Every time I go into a business, they say, oh, well, we just want to make sure that you can do it. You know, like, make sure. Wow. Are you serious right now? Like, at what level can I be competent enough in front of you as a customer to be that way? I'm like, wow.
It's a process to balance out, you know, the stereotypes of race, and also knowing your own identity, knowing yourself and your strengths, and being okay with who you are, and then understanding the identity of your business. It is like so much in there. And that's why I work on mindset with the people I coach, because mindset is so deep and intensive. And that's one of the things I'm working on Keenen with, is the mindset. It's like, and Keenan's 25, I'm 36, just to give you the age thing. So with age, if you look in psychology, you know, you have different identity crises and all that stuff. So I think that may play a part too, and just, you know, seeing the world and blah, 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 blah. I'm working with him to say, okay, Keenen, who are you? Are you okay with you? What is it that you truly want? And how are you going to portray that in your business so that you're okay and that you attract the people who you want to work with?
That is a thick, tall order of crow to work through. that is a lot of crow to eat. And I'm doing the same thing. It's a never-ending process. But to one of the things that Keenen said about, you know, when do I get to be competent? Man, I'm in business now I've been doing this since 2016, producing people's podcasts, right? Some of my white clients are the most micromanaging, demanding clients I've ever had. They're unreal. They come to me, they're, you know, switching things last minute and blaming me for it. Some of them are micromanaging and making sure, like, every single day, like, did you get this done? 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 And some people are like, hey, I'm going to give you every minute little time stamp that I want removed because I don't trust your ear to hear it. You know, like, it happens a lot. And for me, like, when I first hired my editor, oh man, he took that hard. It hit him right in the pride every single time. And it made him angry, and it made him feel like there was something wrong with him. You know, like, why are you treating me like this? Why are you keeping an eye like over me like this? And so, and again, we're both white. We're dealing with a lot of white clientele. Like I said, like, my black clientele, they're like, here is all of my work in advance. You do it how you want to. We trust you. Like, you can get the job done if you want to, how you want to. And if I have any issues, I will bring it up.
And that's why you produced 2 podcasts for me.
It's very laid back, you know. But then a lot of the white people I work with, you know, my white editor and me, the white face of the business, we get a lot of flack from some of our white clientele. And, you know, some people might hear this interview and get mad, but it's the truth. And, you know, like, I
just don't have time to micromanage. I don't have time to micromanage.
Well, I appreciate that. But what we've decided to do as a company culture is outperform. You know, I looked at my editor and I said, if this hurts your feelings and if you don't want to be micromanaged, you have to prove that you don't have to be. You have to prove to these people, you have to go above and beyond what you think you're capable of currently. Listen to the things they're saying to you. Now, and I told them that, like, when someone tells you that I need you to get this, I need you to get that, I need you to get this, I need you to get that, they're afraid you're not organized. It all comes down to them being afraid something's going to go wrong.
That's just a business thing.
You know, and yeah.
And
so
also it's about setting boundaries too.
And sometimes it's not about, like, I don't trust you to be able to do it because you're black or because you're white or because you're young or because you're new or because it's literally just, I'm afraid the results won't be there.
Yeah.
That's typically what I found is the underlying thing is they're afraid something's going to go wrong. And if you can talk to them on that front and comfort them there and assure them that nothing's going to go wrong and they can trust you, that has been for me the great like equalizer. Because the second someone understands that they can trust you, you're not going to let them down, nothing's going to go wrong, everything's going to be smooth, and you'll consistently deliver. Typically after that point, like you've done all the hard work, you've established it, now you just have to maintain the relationship. But before you get there, it is a lot of BS to sift through.
Yeah, but that's business, that's entrepreneurship, because we buy from people who we know, like, and trust. And you got to know somebody first. Then you got to start, okay, liking them and following them around. Then when you trust them, they'll give you the world. It's like they're a raving fan. They'll tell everybody else about you.
And that's one of the things I will say is that know, like, and trust does transcend race, just not right away. It takes time, and you've got to put the time in. You pretty much, like, that's why relationship marketing is so great, I feel, is because once you put the time in, you become friends. And then it doesn't matter. You're more accepting of each other and things like that. But if you're just trying to like cold sell someone of a different race, someone of a different religion, someone of a different class or culture, you better know how to speak to them, and you better be relatable, and they better feel like you're one of them. If not, you don't stand a chance,
We really need to talk about relationship marketing. Those words alone are just so sexy to me. But we need to talk about relationship marketing, because that's what drives my business. And when I stop trying to do the most and worry about everything else and just decided to be me and be real, 100, keep it 100, and keep it 100, and just be like, this is me and this is my style and everything. And I'm going to build those relationships. Oh my gosh, it felt so much better. It didn't feel sleazy or slimy. It just felt so much better because I connect with my clients.
Well, that's been a big one for me. Would I rather work with, someone who is rich, white, in a 3-piece suit every day with a perfect haircut and a perfect family, who drives a Bentley and wants to drop thousands of dollars on my services, but will put me through a nightmare? Or would I rather work with someone, who is Black, speaks in ebonics, is entertaining as hell, is not going to stress me out at the end of the day, and who I can form an actual bond with because maybe we came from similar class backgrounds, or maybe we came from similar, whatever. Because, even, and this is just to say, like, the prim and proper, suited, God-fearing Black people too. Like, who do I want to work for? And it's not about race. It's more so about commonality. I got to find people who don't stress me out, who don't, make me feel like I'm less than, who don't expect me to show up a certain way that goes against my morals and my beliefs and my feelings, all of that. So I really feel like it's about less about color and more about who do you like? Who do you like hanging out with?
Who do you love? Are you for sure?
Hey guys, it's been good talking to you guys, man. Hey, I gotta go, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, do you have any last words, Keenen?
Doesn't matter your race, doesn't matter your color. Be a great fucking business owner, be a great mogul, be a great person at the end of the day, and you will make sales.
Thank you,
Beautiful.
Keenen, for being a guest.
Y'all be good. All right?
So yeah, to kind of round this out, I guess, Airial, is there any way you want to take this?
Ooh, you put me on the spot. We talked about so much stuff, and I really enjoyed the conversation. And I don't think we gave Keenen enough time to speak. We just were back and forth with it. But I appreciate him jumping on because it was like a spur of the moment thing when I invited him to come on. So I appreciate that. And that conversation will more than likely continue because it's so deep. It's multifaceted. That conversation will more than likely continue. So when you look in the show notes or when you're looking at this episode, make sure to comment. Let us know your feedback. I will give a disclaimer. We're not trying to offend anyone. We're just being real.
And I'd like to kind of leave with a thought that perhaps if we focused a little less on race and a little more on likability, do we like each other? Do we not? Are you fun to be around? Do you match my energy? Do we get along? I think that's more important criteria to judge a person by than where they came from or the color of their skin. And it's worked well for me in business so far. regardless of race, regardless of religion, regardless of class. If I enjoy spending time with you, it usually does my life a lot of good. And so I tend to do that. And that's what I base it on. It's just, do I love what you bring to my life? You know?
'Cause you're the yin to my yang, Scott. The ham to my burger. The king to my aid.
I have never heard the ham to my burger. That is the greatest thing ever.
But we are so opposite yet so much alike, and we truly balance each other out. I love it.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan as well. So if that is where we're going to leave it, Airial, you are the ham to my burger, or I am the burger to your ham. I don't know. We're a good combo. And we
With
just got
fries and a shake.
Yeah. And so I hope that you, the listener, enjoyed this talk about race in business. It went some places. It was an impromptu conversation. It happened on the spot. We weren't expecting Keenen to jump in. And so when he did, it offered us a little bit more of a dynamic. You know, it's a touchy subject, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot of opinions on this. But if you've got an example of where you've experienced something like this, if you've got views against this and you don't agree with what we're saying, let's open a dialogue and let's talk. Let's talk about it. Let's get some perspectives, because it's one of those things where it does happen. A lot of people do need to talk about it, but I feel like we are focusing on the wrong things as a global populace. And we need to start finding people who, we get along with and enjoy being around. And we enjoy being around you, and we're grateful that you listen in. If you want to get in touch with Airial or myself about anything at all, please check out the links in the show notes. See you next week.
Thank you for tuning in to the TrepTECH podcast. But if you like what you heard, go on to Apple Podcast and bring her a 5-star review. And also, if you want to check out her service while she transforms mindsets, navigating entrepreneurship, leveraging technology, building relationships while bridging the gap in your business, check out TrepTECHacademy.com. That's TrepTECHacademy.com.